In Luke 17, Jesus says that if you cause one of these little ones of mine to stumble, it would be better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and be thrown into the deepest sea. So there are also concerns that Jesus has for children, and in Genesis he tells us that he created them male and female.
This makes a great point, because we're now with Genesis, the Old Testament, and we just cited two from the New Testament. And last time I checked, we are in a democratic republic where we have separation of church and state. Do you see how we're not separating church and state continuously, especially in this GA?
The bill's title is supposed to be the Protect All Students Act, and thanks to the acceptance of the sub-bill by all of you, we now have a name for our bill. The next thing that we're covering is a very small change permitting an individual to use their official birth record to prove biological sex as long as the birth record was issued at or near the time of the individual's birth. The previous version just specified that the sex listed on the birth record could be relied upon if it was issued at or near the time. So now we're giving them permission to use it. The next issue is multi-occupancy facility prohibitions. We're just defining multi-occupancy facility as a restroom, locker room, changing room, or shower room that is accessible to multiple individuals at the same time. But this does not include a family facility that's designed for an individual or for a family or somebody who needs assistance. And also, we're prohibiting a school or an institution of higher ed from constructing, establishing, or maintaining a multi-occupancy facility that is designated as non-gendered, multi-gendered, or open to all genders. And again, exempting family facilities from the prohibition.
It specifies that the institution cannot knowingly permit. We added the word knowingly. It requires clear signage. It also makes clear exceptions for assisting a child in the restroom, assisting a disabled person in the restroom, assisting in an emergency, and also for janitorial services. It also prohibits the construction or the maintaining of multi-occupancy, multi-gendered restrooms. So I think that's really the 4 or 5 main points.
Do we have any questions? Representative Weinstein.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm just trying to understand, while we're taking this moment to update or to make changes to this bill, why are we hearing this bill? I have had no complaints, and I double-checked that with my staff. I'm not aware of any complaints in higher ed or in education in general about this. So, is this a solution looking for a problem, or do you have some large group of people who are being negatively impacted by this? Like, why are you doing this?
Yes, Vice Chair Manning, Representative Weinstein, I totally hear what you're saying, and I have no doubt to the truthfulness of what you just attested. But we all have different constituencies, and I'm fairly sure that your constituency might not be bringing these things to you, but the same thing is not true of me. And I doubt the same thing is true for others. And so just like I think you're telling the truth, I'm telling the truth when I tell you that this is something that I'm hearing from constituents and superintendents from around the state of Ohio. And so, I think they're both true. But I understand your concern. Why should we do this if you're not hearing from your people? And the reason to do it is because I am hearing from mine, and I think we're hearing from others around the state.
Representative Brown.
Thank you. Representatives, thank you for your sub-bill. In 2021, the United States Supreme Court, including all justices appointed by former President Trump, let stand a ruling from the Fourth Circuit denying access to bathrooms in accordance with one's gender identity can violate both Title IX and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The question in litigation around legislation like this across the country is not whether or not bathrooms and facilities can be segregated by sex. The question is who may use these segregated bathrooms. And the vast majority of courts have ruled that excluding transgender students from using facilities consistent with their gender identities is in fact unlawful discrimination. Would any of the changes in the sub-bill affect those rulings?
Go ahead. Let's both go.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Manning, Representative Brown. As you noted, there are conflicting rulings from the various courts. This issue is about protecting young men, young women, boys and girls, all young men, young women, boys and girls. It's more important that we act on their behalf than that we take into consideration something that is a complete violation of the intent of Title IX. It was never created for this purpose, and there are courts that agree with us on that issue. So pushing forward with this after we have made some changes at the request of higher education is something that's very important to both my joint sponsor and myself.
Vice Chair, if I could also chime in, Representative Brown, you know, you said the Fourth Circuit? Yeah, so Fourth Circuit, you know, obviously that doesn't pertain to Ohio, and so also there has been no U.S. Supreme Court decision on this point. And so I think we feel like it's important to carry this forward despite that one ruling in the Fourth Circuit.
Follow up?
Continue.
Thank you. The Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is this district, has interpreted both federal anti-discrimination laws and Ohio statutes to prohibit discrimination based on gender identity, considering that a subset of sex discrimination. And the ruling of the Fourth Circuit, the Supreme Court denied cert, which means it's essentially the Fourth Circuit's ruling stands. The Supreme Court didn't overturn it. So my question still remains, there are courts, and maybe there are courts that rule one way, there are courts that rule the other way. Arguably, the Supreme Court has indirectly supported this Fourth Circuit's position. And the question I asked was, do any of the changes you've made, would any of those changes specifically have any direct impact upon the applicability of any of the legislation that you're aware of, the case law that you're aware of regarding this issue?
Vice Chair Manning and Rep. Brown, we made changes to this bill based on meetings that we had with interested parties. We did not make any changes to this bill based on Fourth Circuit court rulings. And so I believe that this is an issue that is important to a growing number of Americans and a growing number of Ohioans. And I think that in light of that, in what I view as a growing momentum in our country and in our state for a bill language like this, that there's going to be additional litigation and perhaps court cases that make it to the U.S. Supreme Court on issues such as this. And I think that we as a legislative body need to weigh in, and we need to quit sitting on the sideline while the executive branch in Washington, D.C. makes decisions and while the judicial branch makes decisions. We need to weigh in as a legislative branch in the state of Ohio.
Ranking Member Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair to the sponsors. So you had stated we have issues with this as a problem down in your area, but maybe not where we're at. We're making law that, of course, many of us see as unconstitutional, and we're making law to suit a certain group of people that have issue with bathrooms and their use by certain groups of people. Besides the fact that we're making those decisions based on a certain group of people, but we're going to write law for the entire state, which really goes against the idea of home rule. Maybe I can move away from the Constitution and move into something that over the holiday season I got to hear again. And maybe I can ask you, how does this jive? How does this match up with maybe something that's more familiar? There's a song that was based off of Matthew 25. And it basically said, "Whatsoever you do to the least of my people, that you do unto me. How do you jive this bill with the teachings that you proclaim?
Vice Chair Manning, Representative Miller, thank you for your question, and thank you for bringing up the Christmas season and what the Bible has to say. Because in Luke 17, Jesus says that if you caused one of these little ones of mine to stumble, it would be better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and be thrown into the deepest sea. So there are also concerns that Jesus has for children, and in Genesis, he tells us that he created them male and female.
How do you feel about this bill's religious backing, enforcing the religious backing onto those in our society who may not subscribe to the Old or New Testament?
Vice Chair Manning and Representative Miller, I would point out that we didn't bring up the Bible. You did. And I don't think that we've talked about what the Bible says during our testimony. And we've talked about protecting kids, and I think in the end that that's really what this is about. And I don't think that there's anything in this bill that's in conflict with what the Bible teaches. But again, I would point out that we didn't bring that up.
Well, if we're not using science, then I figured maybe we were using religion. Thank you, Chair.
Representative Abdullahi.
Abdullahi, thank you, Chair. I guess we go back to the question that we had in the beginning. How do you plan on enforcing this? Do you plan on having students carry their birth certificates before they go to the bathroom? Like, what's this supposed to look like?
Vice Chair Manning, Representative Abdullahi, what it says in the bill is that education institutions can create policies, and they need to create policies that are consistent with the language in the bill. So we are giving them the ability to decide how they want to take what we hope will become law and use it, and we're giving them some tools by suggesting that they can use the birth certificate if it was issued at or near the time of birth. So that's one of the main reasons, or one of the main ways that we are trying to make sure that both K through 12 and higher ed have opportunities to create policies that fit their student body.
Continue.
Thank you. I know I'm new, but last I checked, laws are not suggestions, they're laws. So what would be the penalty? As I know there's nothing written here, but so what's the purpose of this if it's not an actual law?
Vice Chair Manning, Representative Abdullahi.
Abdullahi.
The penalty would be up to the policy writer and in that school and Institute of Higher Ed. And so what this bill says is, especially for institutes of higher ed, they shall not knowingly permit. And so that to me says that you're not going to post a guard at the restroom, but once you know about it because someone has complained about it, then you as an administrator of that school, you are tasked with doing something about it. And so, you know, in my life in education, I believe in the principle of progressive discipline. And I think that most educators do. And so, you don't give them the most severe punishment at first. You give them something a little bit light and say, hey, you know, don't do that again. And if they continue to violate that, then you go a little bit more stringent. And so what I would say is this bill doesn't prescribe to the educational institute what the punishment's going to be. That's on them to write that.
That sounds dangerous. Thank you.
I heard some things in the testimony that piqued my curiosity, having taught history and sociology and government at levels. I've come to realize that we look for patterns. We look for patterns of human behavior and how policy, and historically, certain behaviors have resulted in policies, whether they come out of the state or out of the federal level. And this is eerily reminiscent of discussions in the 50s about how white women feared black males in the same restaurant, in the same room, in the same area. They feared that. And that this is what I'm hearing, these same arguments. It's eerily similar to the racist policies that were had in the South regarding special bathrooms, special water fountains, can't use the same restaurants, can't look a white woman in the eyes. This is just a different group of Americans, of Ohioans, of citizens, which we are so wrapped up in. My question to you is this: do you see a parallel there? And if you don't, please help me to understand how it's not there.
Vice Chair Manning, Representative Miller, I agree with you that what you described happening 40, 50, 60 years ago is racist and should be rejected by our society. And we need to make sure that we have policies, laws in place that walk us as a society away from racist activities. But I would also reject the argument that this bill is similar. And I would not see this bill as being racist. I wouldn't see this bill as being hurtful to people of a certain demographic. This is a bill about safety.
Representative Lear, I know in previous testimony you've said that boys can't become girls, girls can't become boys. The language that you've used today about claiming that a man could be Woman of the Year implies, in my view, and I think to many, that you don't believe that transgender people exist. Recently at CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Committee conference, a speaker said that transgender people should be eradicated from the earth. Do you believe that trans people exist, and if so, do you believe they should be wiped away or kept out of public life completely?
Vice Chair Manning, Representative Weinstein, of course you know that that is a ridiculous question. I absolutely don't think anybody should be wiped out. One of the main reasons that Representative Byrd and I are doing this is because of our concern for all children. And I do believe the science is very clear. There are only two genders, and I am greatly grieved that so many in our culture are lying to children and telling them that they can change who they are. There's nothing wrong with who they are. They shouldn't be told that you have to be somebody different and you have to carve up your body in order to be acceptable. That is horrible. But our job is to protect all people. And as legislators, I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're not only providing safe spaces for kids and young adults who are very confused about who they are, but we're also providing safe spaces for young men and women and boys and girls who are not.
In your response, you said you think these kids are being told. You don't think it's coming from the kids. You don't think it's something that they feel about their bodies. You maybe claim it's parents or something like that, or some other influence that's telling them this. I mean, you know, for me, I care about parents' rights. I trust children. Do you not?
Vice Chair Manning, Representative Weinstein, children have an imagination and their brains are not fully formed until about the age of 25. I think everybody on this committee knows that and agrees with that. So if I had a child who was anorexic, am I going to tell that child, oh, you know what, you're right, you're so fat, let me get you diet pills so you eat less? No. If I had a child who thought he was a bird, am I going to take him to a doctor who tells him, you know what, the best thing to do is to let him explore being a bird? And oh, by the way, there's a 5-story building next door. Why don't you jump off and see if you can fly? There are ridiculous things that we are doing and allowing. And as adults who understand law, science, and religion, we need to take responsibility for the things we say and do and how we raise this next generation. Are parents allowed to abuse their kids? No. So there are limits, and we need to set a limit and draw a line in the sand.
Continue.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I just take offense to you comparing transgender people to people imagining they're other species or things like that. I find that personally very offensive, and I think many people across the state would agree with me.